speaker this evening is among the most recognized tech investors in New York City. He started the very first venture firm in Brooklyn. Please welcome the sole partner and founder of Brooklyn Bridge Ventures, Charlie O'Donnell.
So, Brooklyn residents? Nice. Who's first, my seat will be done. First time attending, okay. Who's seen me speak somewhere else before? Good, so none of this will be repeat. So my name is Charlie O'Donnell. I run a venture firm, which basically means that I give away money for a living, which is, I assume, why the attendance is better than people thought it was going to be. I have not brought any of that money with me, so if you guys want to leave, I won't be offended. So I'm happy to talk about data-related startups, but I think the whole fundraising world is very interesting because everybody writes about it, and from my perspective, nobody really knows that much about it, but it doesn't stop people from talking about it. And so if you are thinking about doing a startup, or you have something, or you've been out fundraising, there is now more information out there for you than there has ever been. So the cat is out of the bag in terms of venture capital information, and I really wish we put it all back. I wish that we can go back to the time where no one knew anything about venture capital. All you attempted to do was to build really awesome products, and then by some mysterious process, someone would show up at your door and you say, hey, by the way, you don't have to do this bootstraps. Like, yeah, I'll give you money. And that'll be it. And we wouldn't worry about what VCs are looking to fund. We wouldn't try and make sense of the feedback that they gave you, because most of the time, if you've gone pitching, they'll tell you it's very interesting. And then you'll never hear from them again. And you can't figure out what happened. I thought it was really interesting, or I thought you were going to take it to your partners, and how did you not know that your partners weren't going to be interested? You've been working with them for 20 years. And so, I try and bring stuff back to basics, and I'll go through a little bit about just some of the basics and some tips and things that I see, and happy to go deeper and break this into Q&A. So first of all, by saying I run a venture fund, what does that mean? So there's a pool of money that I have access to. It is mostly not my money. My dad was a New York City firefighter. My mom worked in the school system, so I apprenticed my way through venture capital. I like to say that I worked for the 3 best venture capital firms in New York: Union Square Ventures and First Ground Capital, and my own. And started out as an analyst and worked my way to a principal, which is actually somewhat rare. Usually the way people get into VC is they start a company, sell it, maybe start doing some angel investing, have a couple of wins, build up a little bit of a track record, and then wind up joining a firm. The other way to get into venture capital is just to have a lot of money, because there's no license, there's no regulatory, you don't have to pass a test, you don't have to have a personality, you don't have to have intelligence. Like, if you have money, you too can be a venture capitalist, right? So there's absolutely no criteria for it. Some of us are very good at it, others not so much. Some of us are lucky. The hard thing is it takes like 25 years to figure out which is which. I think it's a little bit of both. I actually come from a sort of portfolio management background. So I used to fund funds. So no one ever thinks of like VCs as having to pitch for their money, but like I have to pitch too. I get it, it really sucks. And the worst part about it is, for me, my fund is a little bit small for institutional investors. So I have to pitch family offices, people who like don't want to get found. Like rich people don't usually want to get found. At least in your case, VCs do want to get found. It may be hard to get them to answer your emails or whatever, but they don't actually have a job unless they make themselves known and somewhat open to pitches, right? Because if you don't know the firm exists, they're not going to pitch you. So to some extent, they need you, right? They don't want a lot of you to have bad ideas and show up at their inbox all at once, but they still need pitches, right? And so I find it interesting actually that a lot of times when people approach me, there's this perception that like my time is more valuable than yours. It is not, by far, right? In New York, giving away money for a living is like selling snow in the winter, basically, right? There's no shortage of money in New York. There are a lot of people that have a lot of money. It is the same color as the money that I give, right? And so there's actually a shortage of really good ideas. There's a shortage of really great entrepreneurs. So if you're one of those people, there's way more of me than there is of you, so I need you more than you need me. And so when somebody comes up and says, I know you're really busy, can I just take 5 minutes? That's actually the wrong perspective. Right? You are going deep in your company. You're making a big bet. You believe in this thing, so act like you believe it. Right? Get really excited about it. You know, I should be thrilled to get excited about your company and spend time with it. And if I'm not that guy, then move on to somebody else. There's lots of other people who have money. And I think that's an important factor too, is figuring out like who's really going to be interested. When I pitched my fund to try and raise my fund, I realized there were 3 questions, and unfortunately I didn't realize this right away. I probably spent 5 months like spinning my wheels, like not knowing how to fundraise for a fund. And then I realized there were 3 questions that somebody had to answer yes to for me to even be worth spending time with them. Like, do you want to invest in a fund? Can you write a check from anywhere from like 250 grand to $2 million? And do you like venture capital? Because there was no way I was going to convince you of venture capital if all you ever did was like invest in real estate all the time. Like venture capital is crazy to anybody who isn't already excited about it. It makes no sense. It sounds like a terrible idea. So you're not going to go into venture capital if you aren't already excited about technology or entrepreneurship or all that sort of stuff, right? And I made that my like hard and fast criteria. So people would introduce me, oh, I got to meet so-and-so. You know, she sold this business, she's got a lot of money. She's interested in funding entrepreneurs. She want to be in a fund. She's not going to be able to vet the deals directly. That's what I do. And here's the check size. If it doesn't work, not worth my time, because you have to think about it like a sales process. Nobody wants to spend time with a bad lead. Right? It doesn't matter how hard you push on that bad lead if they're not a buyer. And a really great example, there's the top selling salesperson at Single Platform, which is one of the companies that I backed when I was at First Round, is not the highest converting salesperson. She's actually the person who makes the most calls. She's really great at cutting off those calls if the person's not going to buy. And she just moves on. She's got them all lined up and stacked up and all that sort of stuff. She runs a good sales process. What's the difference between venture capital and angel investing? Which could be very confusing, because if somebody comes up to me and says, do you do angel investments? Technically, angel investments mean I spend my money to invest in you. So a very small part of my fund is mine. But I'll still answer yes to that question, because what I think you're really asking is, do I go early and am I willing to write smaller checks? Right? So people think of venture capital as like a $10 million round, and you just need sort of $500,000 to launch your company, or $750,000. So you say you're just looking for angels, but if I made 250 grand available in a very painless process, I don't think you'd ask me where the money came from, so long as it wasn't illegally gotten, right? So yes, I participate in angel rounds, but it's not technically an angel investment. What are the types of companies that I'm looking for? This is another thing that I think, one of the titles of this talk was like how to get your data company funded. It's largely the same as how to get your retail company funded or how to get your any other kind of company funded. There's a lot less specialization on the venture capital and angel side than you would think. Mostly people on my side of the table just want to make a lot of money. And it's your job to convince us how you can help us make a lot of money. there's levels of a lot of money. Okay. One just personal philosophy I have is there's levels of wealth for people that are life-changing, and everybody's got different ones. For me, it's get exactly the apartment I want and exactly the location I want. So I live in Bay Ridge in Brooklyn, it's a little far from the city. I'd like to be a little closer. That's my immediate first step goal with my fund. Above that is majority ownership in a Major League Baseball team. I don't know what's in between there, but if you gave me $30 million, I'm not really sure what I would do with it once I spent money on the apartment, because I'm pretty sure I can't buy a team, at least not a team that anybody wants to own. I wouldn't own the Reds, who cares? But if I don't get to that level, it's not life-changing for me. You have to think about the same thing with venture capital investors. Being able to sell a company for $5 million, for probably most of the people in this room, is life-changing money. I don't know who has $5 million in their bank account here, but I don't. Probably most of you don't. You probably wouldn't go to the venture capitalist talk if you had that, right? But that actually doesn't move the needle for me as a fund, even with a small fund. And the size of the fund and the size of the pool really matters. So I have an $8 million fund that I'm investing in now, which is microscopic in terms of most VC funds. And I'm still looking for companies that can exit for an enterprise value of at least $250 million. Because here's the problem. Despite the pitches and the excitement I have over each of the investments I make, and they all swear to me they're going to be billion-dollar, unicorn, IPO, whatever, I'd be thrilled if they sold for $250 million. They're not all going to be winners, right? And in fact, the way that my math works, for every 30 companies that I invest in, 17 of them are going to be zeros, just absolute wipeouts. Despite the best intentions of everybody going in and all the hard work and all that sort of stuff, it's just really hard. And so a lot of times it's not going to work out, right? If you're swinging for the fences, sometimes you're going to strike out. And so 17 of those companies not going to wind up being worth anything. 3 of those companies, I hope, will be worth $250 million. And why 250? If you look at the average venture-backed M&A transaction, forget about companies going public, but when companies buy other companies, it's kind of in the $200 to $300 million range on average. And so, to me, I don't want to build a model that assumes that anybody is anybody better than average, right? I think it's dangerous thinking to be like, oh, I'm smarter than the average VC. I can find the billion-dollar companies. There's nothing that I can do that could change okay, I'm not going for $250 million exits, I'm going for billion-dollar exits. That doesn't happen, right? And so, to me, if you are backable and you are operating in markets that are big enough for that kind of exits, maybe you get the wind at your back. You maybe get a little momentum, maybe it turns out you're the last company standing in that space and 3 companies want to buy you and you get bid up and you do become a billion-dollar acquisition. But I'm sort of focused in on that $250 million range. 3 companies, 3 out of the 30, 10% of the companies that I invested will hopefully get there. And then the other 10 will probably be $50 million outcomes. We raise a round or 2 of money. You still probably own a nice chunk of the company. Somebody comes in and says, hey, why don't we just buy you right now for $50 million? And despite the fact that you told me this was going to be a billion-dollar outcome, owning half of a $50 million exit, that's pretty good. Not baseball team good, but certainly apartment good, right? And so nobody ever says they're going to sell for $50 million when they take venture capital money. But I had an entrepreneur get a $100 million offer for his company 2 years in. And he called me up and said, what do you think I should do? He had a $16 million offer of venture capital to put into the company at a nice valuation. But that meant we're going for the big thing. You're now going to be stuck in this company for the next 4 years, 5 years, or whatever. Or he owned at least, I forget how much he owned, probably owned half the company maybe a little less than that, and a $100 million acquisition after 2 years. He said, what should I do? I said, are you asking me whether or not I think you're capable of building a $500 million company? I said, yes, I think you're 100% capable. I believe in this model. I believe in this team. If you're asking me to be the guy who tells you to turn down $50 million in your pocket, I'm not going to be that guy. Invest in my next fund, I'll back you again the next time around, but like I'm not going to tell you to turn down that money. So you do whatever you want, I'm going to be supportive. He took the acquisition and everybody was happy and he became an investor in my next fund. So size matters. There are a lot of very good ideas that are not big ideas. And big like $250 million idea, big. So when you're thinking of like whatever your concept is, whatever your idea is, think about that exit. Think about, can I, reasonably exit? You have a technology that analyzes the Amazon book sales data and the social data around, authors or something, and you have the best technology for helping an author sell more books. And you start thinking about, well, who would want that? Well, maybe a publisher would want to own that. Yes, entirely possible that a publisher would want to own that. But given the state of publishing today, I don't know any publishing companies that acquire tech for $250 million. Like, they don't have that kind of cash in the bank, right? So it's just very hard pressed to imagine that kind of an exit going to some of those companies. Now, there are some angel investors out there who'd be thrilled with a $10 million exit. They'd be thrilled with a $20 million exit. Why? Because a lot of angel investors and high net worth individuals, they obviously don't want to lose their money, but what they're really doing is trading wealth for interestingness. Because they don't really need more wealth. Right? More wealth is nice, but at some point, like, I don't know how many rounds of golf you can play and all that sort of stuff, like, they want to be involved in cool stuff. And everybody in this room is involved in really cool stuff. They want to be able to tell their friends, you see this app, this is going to be the next big thing. Like, I'm an investor, I'm an early, they have this dream of being in the next Uber or whatever, and being a part of that. It's a great story. I have a company that I'm investing in now. A Fortune 50 CEO has made this company, a little tiny company that's doing just under $4 million in revenue, has made it his own little pet project. Like, he's got a whole company to run. Emails the entrepreneur like twice a week. Just thinks it's the coolest thing, like, helping him and all that sort of stuff. I was like, seriously? This is the kind of email? Got an email from the CEO, says, over the sort of last weekend in August, I'm on a boat off the coast of Spain with this celebrity, and we're talking about how much we love your product. Just want to let you know. I realize this is a charmed life, but I thought you should know that you're being talked about, right? Why are they involved in that? Because at some level of corporate success or whatever, things get kind of routine. You might think it's very exciting to run a Fortune 50 company, but at some point they kind of get a little bored of it. And helping an entrepreneur, a little two-person company toiling away in the back of the WeWork somewhere is cool to them, right? And so that's how I would sort of think about angel investors. Maybe your idea is a $20 million idea, and there's just some angels who would be thrilled to work with you and your team and work us in this idea, and it should exist, and they could get excited about it. Let me talk about the machinations of how people wind up getting money and approaching VCs. The number one response I have to most companies who pitch me is probably, this is not appropriate for venture capital. One of the reasons why it's not appropriate for venture capital is the size thing. Another one is that, while yes, it's true, you probably could go faster without it, you'd be surprised at how little times you actually need to go faster. You're afraid of big company X from building this thing. Well, big company X doesn't actually build things. The people who work at big company X do that. And who within that company is the person who is super psyched to be entrepreneurial within that company? If they were, they would have left already. They'd be sitting next to you in the WeWork, right? They wouldn't be at that company anymore. We just had this example. There was a business development person who kept poking around one of my companies. And the entrepreneur's like, should I talk to them about what we're doing? Like, I'm afraid that this company's gonna do something. I said, well, you know, don't give away the special sauce, but go in the meeting and listen and see what they have to say. Took 2 meetings, kind of poking around. We're sort of trying to figure out what this guy's doing. Then we get the email, the mass email to all your contacts all at once. After 7 long years at big company X, I've decided to leave and, you know, look for next things and whatever. That guy was leaving. He was poking around and checking out startups and trying to figure out who was cool. He wasn't trying to steal the idea for this big company, and if he wasn't going to do it at that company with all their resources. Plus, if you're telling me that, you know, 500 grand makes the difference between success and not being successful, Google's got that 500 grand. In fact, they have way more than that 500 grand, right? If it's the difference between hiring 2 and 3 developers, there's another company that has plenty of developers who could outgun you. But you need some unique insight, some unique play. You need to be able to understand why aren't they going to do that. Right? So I just got sent a great video from the CEO of Benari. Benari is a connected home security device. If you've taken the subway in the last month, you've probably seen their advertisements all over the place. I led the seed round of that company when it was a PowerPoint before the Indiegogo pre-sale. And it was some Hallmark channel, I don't even, is that what Lifetime was or something like that? So it was some Hallmark channel show where there was a story of some guy in an apartment who literally watched burglars enter his apartment from his Benari app while he was sitting at work, and had the whole, it's a crazy video. But when I think back to when they first pitched, you know, ADT is the big home security player in the space. And you say, well, why can't ADT do this? Well, it's sort of very simple. Every single thing that everybody in the security space like ADT does is perimeter security. That's basically been the way that all security has been designed. We draw a box around this thing, we put a thing on every door, we put a thing in every window, and if anybody breaks through the perimeter, we sound an alarm. Basically, every security system is like that. Benari, you put a thing in the corner, it sort of scans the room. The reality is, if somebody opens your bathroom window and doesn't come in, while slightly scary, not actually a real security problem. They change their mind, they leave. There's no real harm done there. And so if you're able to accept sort of 1% less security, you're able to take the overhead down 99%. Right now you don't need to wire every window and install a thing in every square. Now all of a sudden you just put this thing in the corner. And you know, we're not all starring diamonds in our apartments or you know, some really expensive stuff. And so most consumers are willing to make that trade-off. I'd rather install something easier. Right? So that goes against the core of everything that ADT designs. And they just don't operate like that. That's not the DNA of their company. And they have an installer network and all this. They have a momentum and a certain way of entrenchment, and this is the story that I got that helped convince me that this was a space they were either not going to enter or just be extremely slow. It's sort of like turning a big oil tanker or something like that. You can't change the whole DNA of how a company gets designed. So how do people approach me? And what's the sort of best way? The best thing that you can do to help your chances of getting funding and also to make your company a better company is be the team that somebody wants to work with in a space. What does that mean? A, assemble the best team you can imagine. Go out of your way to find the people who are best at doing the things that you don't know how to do. right? So it may sound really cool for you and your PhD classmate to work on something together, right? But is that the best person that complements you? Are you missing something on your team? Can you with a straight face say, no, we're actually the best team at doing this particular thing? And if not, finding that team. Personal brand is a big thing. And it can be something so simple as running the MySQL meetup. Right? If somebody like David comes to me and says, I have an idea, right? It's not just him and his background, but I know that if he was going to quit his day job to spend all of his time on an idea, he has a great network of people to vet this by. It's very improbable that somebody with his network who runs the meetup would fall into spending time on a really stupid data idea. Right? Just because there's a million people in this room be like, I don't really think that's such a good idea. Maybe you should think about something else, right? Not only that, I know that he's got a network of resources that he can tap, so I don't just get his brain. I get everybody in the meetup's brain. Right? So having that network and personal brand is not just about marketing. It's about, if I fund you and you have 3 openings for developers on your team, I have a very strong confidence you're going to be able to find those 3 people. Or that those 3 people already know you and already think you're smart and have been dying to work with you on a project for the last 5 years. Have you talked to successful CTOs about where they get their first 10 hires? I mean, this is something that Harry Heyman, who was the CTO at Foursquare, told me. He said, I don't think I would invest in a company where they didn't already know who their first 10 hires were going to be. Because they already know them and worked with them before, and it's just so hard in those early stages that you want people who know you, and you know you can work with them to be a part of your team. So who would be the first 10 people on your team? There's plenty of instances where, you know, the person you really want to hire has 3 kids and a mortgage, and there's just realities of like how much it costs to live there, live in New York, and all that sort of stuff. That's fine, but ability to hire and feel like, you know, you clearly have a strong background. I can see people wanting to work for you, and having that network is really important. Accomplishing something in the space. There's lots of ancillary things that you can do. You know, you're building some new database setup, and you're the author of some format, or you were one of the key people on some open source project, or, you know, I start poking around, because think about my due diligence process. I'm not an expert on anything, basically. If I was, I'd be building a company in that space, right? So I'm sitting on the sidelines throwing money at, not throwing money, but investing money in all these companies, right? And I'm depending on you to be the expert and to tell me, you know, why something is good or not. And what I am good at is playing network golf. And network golf is, I don't know the answer to that question, but I know who knows the answer to that question. Well, I know that they know somebody who knows the answer to that question, right? I can pretty much figure out who should know something about that. In an ideal world, they already know you, because you've been around to them. You're building some tool that helps publishers monetize, right? Well, I was an investor at Refinery 29 when I was at First Round Capital. So automatically, all of my publishing questions go to the team at Refinery 29. Hey, have you seen this already? So what's the range of best answers, right? No, we hadn't, you know, the worst answer is like, no, we haven't heard of that, that doesn't sound that interesting. The best answer, actually the medium answer is, yes, that sounds interesting. You know what the even better one is? They send you to me. You've already spoken to the customer, right? Because you're supposed to be doing your customer development. You're supposed to be out there putting this in front of people saying, I know you have this problem, or I think you have this problem. here's the way I propose solving it, this is the way we do it, you talk to their team, you spend a lot of time with them, all that sort of stuff. And they are just blown away by how smart you are. And they're like, when can you have this built? And you're like, well, you know, it's probably gonna take 250 grand to build it or whatever. And then their first call is to me. And they're like, listen, I just met this team. They have the right answer. We've seen everything else in this space, and everybody else is screwing up in this way. They're going this way. We really think that's the best way. You should talk to these people. I was an advisor and a speaker in the Daily News Innovation Lab. Right, same thing. That would be my second. You know, if you were building a publishing tool, where I would go talk to Sina, who runs their digital stuff, and she has sent me deals. So most customers of tech know investors, because investors are always reaching out to them. I'm trying to make connections at all of those players because I want to be able to offer you to them, but I also want to go to them to ask questions, right? So having stuff come from the customer side, I think is really key. The other thing, social media. Medium is an absolutely fantastic platform. It takes all of the worst parts of blogging away. So like one of the worst parts of blogging, right? Getting started, right? That blank page of like, what am I gonna call this blog? What domain should I pick? Oh, I came up with a really good, the domain's taken, right? And then you don't wanna commit to the domain because what if you change what you wanna write about, all this sort of stuff. Then you gotta pick colors, you gotta get a designer, all this sort of stuff. Medium's like, we're not gonna let you do any of that. You can't change colors on the page, you can't pick your own domain, you just sign in with Twitter, you get a thing. And oh, by the way, you don't even have to worry about the fact that you're not gonna become a regular blogger because we're not even gonna put dates on this thing. So nobody knows that you haven't blogged in 3 months. It's fine, it's not gonna look bad. So you can just put this stuff out there and it can kind of live forever. I've gotten jobs from my blog, not because some post went viral, but because I was talking to VCs. My first job in venture capital, working for Fred Wilson and Brad Burnham at Union Square Ventures. They were pitching to me when I was funding funds. And I asked them, how does somebody get into venture capital? And their response was, you want to come and find out? Why did they respond that way? Well, because I had a link in my signature to my blog 11 years ago. And they were able to see the last 9 months of what I was thinking about and what I was writing about. It's 2015. If you were to get married, you would never ever hire a wedding photographer that didn't have an online portfolio. Right? Just you want to see all what they did, right? People are hiring you now for your brain. You're a knowledge worker. I'm investing in you for your brain. So where do I see your brain? And how it works. Your resume? Like, that doesn't really tell me anything, because there's probably 58 other people who have pretty similar resumes to you. Are you smarter than them? Are you more personable? Are you more intellectual? I have no idea, just based on the resume. But if you pitch me, and maybe you don't even necessarily have an official background in that space, you're a hobbyist, a tinkerer, right? And then there's a little blurb on the bottom, the link, and I click through, and I just get engrossed about like, wow, yeah, like data is really gonna change the way, whatever. Data is gonna change my experience when I go to the doctor. And I just, if you can get me to think that, wow, this is a really fascinating person that I would just like to sit down and have a conversation with, that's the first step. Forget about the PowerPoint and the pitch and the size of the market or whatever. Like, if I just read through and says, like, this is gonna be an interesting experience for me to sit down and talk to this person, that's the way to get into the venture capital firm. Because what I really do for a living is I have interesting conversations with interesting people. Most of those conversations don't turn into funding for any number of reasons. Maybe you're poking around an idea, you decide not to do it. Maybe I decide I'm not the best fit for it. Maybe the idea's not big enough, any number of reasons, but I'm still always gonna be glad I had that interesting conversation. How do you reach out to somebody? How do you get somebody's attention? If you come to me and you say, you can't a lot of people say, well, how do I get the attention of VCs? 9 times out of 10, most of those people have not tried. They assume it's going to be really hard, and they haven't actually emailed people. And if you have and you're not getting a response, there's something wrong there. Right? You're telling me you are capable of building a $250 million enterprise company, and you can't even get a meeting with a VC. Think about the math of that, okay? Most seed stage VCs probably take anywhere from 5 to 10 meetings a week. If they take 10 meetings a week, 52 weeks a year, minus the 2 weeks in August they go on vacation, they might be meeting with 500 companies. In New York, there's probably only about 350 companies that get like seed from institutional finance. So that means that almost half of the companies that they take meetings with don't get funded by anyone. So when you look out in the market and you see a lot of like just stupid shit getting funded, the bar for getting a meeting is even worse than that, right? Because half of people that are getting meetings don't get funded by anybody, right? So if you've ever gone to a startup meetup and somebody tells you their idea and you know they raised money from someone, you're like, somebody invested in that? Like, it's worse than that. So it shouldn't be that hard to get a meeting, right? And you have to think about your pitch, do some A/B testing. Question to say, okay, I have a reason to pitch this particular investor. Right? I did my research, I poked around AngelList, I looked at their portfolio, I followed them on Twitter, I saw what they wrote. I have reason to believe that this investor should be interested in this thing. So do your homework, qualify this lead. And then you nudge them, you send them an email, and be patient because we do give away money for a living, so our inboxes are rather full. A lot of people are asking for money. Don't ever just go one and done. Oh, I emailed them. They didn't respond back to me. Politely forward it back to them again. Not sure if you saw this. Ping them on Twitter. Not with the pitch. I hate Twitter pitches. Hey, sent you an email. Just want to make sure you saw it. That's it, right? If somebody drops you an email twice, then I'm like, oh shit, I really I dropped the ball on that one. I'm gonna go find it. If you are the right team, and I've been doing this long enough, we guaranteed we have to have LinkedIn connections in the home. Right? I'm okay with the cold emails. A lot of investors say they're not. I suspect that if you were like, hey, we won MIT's business plan competition or whatever the thing is, or we just built this database that has whatever milliseconds quicker than the best thing your company's used, I think they'd take the meeting. I'm pretty sure they would. I think that's a way to just create an artificial bar to get rid of the worst 25% of the deals. I think if you had an app and you screenshotted the number of downloads you had and it was like 10 million, I'm pretty sure they'd take the meeting on a cold email. But if you really need that intro, and because it shows me how you would act going after candidates. Once I invest in you, how are you going to hire that hotshot developer to add to your team, or that great salesperson? Right? It shows me how you would close a sale, because you're probably going to have to be your initial salesperson. Right? So if you can't reach me, and I probably do a speaking thing like every other week, if you can't reach any of my peers, that should be the easiest part of this whole thing. Another way to sort of think about it is, if you are the right team and you have the right connections, chances are you are connected to somebody who has achieved some level of success in this space. Why aren't they funding it? Maybe they don't have a lot of money, but 25K? That's not that much. The ability to be an accredited investor, to invest in startups, you need to make 200 grand a year as an individual or 300 as a household. In New York City, there's a fair amount of people who fit into that category. They might not have angel investor as a shingle on their door, but a lot more people in your network. And I'd say that as a criteria, I at one time told a group of students, I said, you know how if somebody's a really good cook, they'll say, oh man, you're such a good cook. If you opened a restaurant one day, I would invest in it. Well, who are the people across your career that have essentially said things like that to you, or think that way about you? Those are the first people that should be dipping their hand in their pocket, people who know you best. Before I go into Q&A, I'll talk a little bit about data and data startups. It is your job to explain to me how you are going to make a lot of money as if I was an idiot. And many of the best venture capitalists are not necessarily the most intelligent people. They're very nice, right? But there was not a Mensa test or anything else like that. They're good at trend spotting, but they're not necessarily nearly as technically sophisticated as most of the people in this room. That shouldn't matter. One of the key attributes of an entrepreneur is that you can bridge that gap. Best example I've ever seen of that, I always give this example, but it's my favorite one. When I was at First Round Capital, I backed a company called Chloe and Isabel. And Chloe and Isabel is a direct sales jewelry company. I can barely dress myself, as you can see, and I really don't know anything about fashion jewelry. But Chantel pitched a PowerPoint, raised $3.25 million on a PowerPoint in her seed round, or her initial round, whatever you want to call it. Had not a single investor turn her down. Literally ran the table. It's the only time I've ever seen anybody do that. Male, female, anything. For a jewelry company. Okay, so how is that possible? Well, right away she realized she had empathy for the person on the other side of the table. She said, what does this person want? This person wants to make money. So her intro line was, have you ever heard of Stella & Dot? Never heard of Stella & Dot. Well, Stella & Dot is a direct sales jewelry company that has gone from 3 to 30 to $110 million of revenue in 3 years. Whoa. I'm like, now I'm leaning in. Right? I ignored, you said something about jewelry, I wasn't even paying attention, I can't remember the name. But like, 3 to 30 to 100, like when somebody did something related to what you were doing and achieved that level of success, well, now I'm paying attention. Right, because that's what I do for a living. I try and make money, and you just told me somebody just like struck oil essentially somewhere. And so now I have all sorts of secondary questions, right? Well, you know, is the market big enough? Can you have another one, or is that train left the station? But now I'm like into the conversation. Well, as it turns out, the top 5 direct sales jewelry companies, they all make over $100 million, and they represent less than 4% of the overall fashion jewelry market. I.e., you could build another 8 of these things, right? But you can't, because there aren't 8 qualified founders who know how to build one of these things. There aren't 8 qualified founders who know that apparently all of the best jewelry manufacturers in China are Korean owned. This is one of the things you learn when you're a VC who does a wide variety of stuff. Like, I don't know why that is, but if you really want to get like high quality, well, it's fashion jewelry, right? So but it's the Korean-owned factories in China are really good at it. There's some beveling that they do really well. I don't know. But if you're qualified to build that company, you would know that. And Chantel spent 15 years in the fashion jewelry space, launched fashion jewelry for Old Navy, and since it's a direct sales company, sold Cutco knives. Paid her way through college selling Cutco knives. Top-selling West Coast salesperson. Right? So like, you couldn't build a better entrepreneur to do that particular business. Would I fund her to do a data startup? No. So, you know, barely knows how to use the phone. I mean, she knows how to use the phone, but like, you know, she knows jewelry, she knows fashion, and you know, was the right entrepreneur for that particular thing. Right? So, started out with the money, worked backwards to, let me tell you about the dynamics around how people make money, or like why I'm different. She had some why I'm different things that played out. And then she said, here's why I'm the best person to go and do this. Right? And she convinced everybody across the table. So I think that's key. You can tell me you're building the coolest thing or whatever. Why should I care? Why do other people in their space care? Why are you excited about this business? And I think a lot of times with technical talent, you build things because you can, and because it's fun or cool or interesting or whatever. That's great. It's a little different than like why a business should exist and somebody should fund it in that space. Here's my perception of a lot of data-related companies. I've gotten a million pitches lately, and it's really funny that like everybody seems to pitch all the same stuff at the same time. Of like, how do I make big data easy for non-data scientists? I don't like, is there anybody in the room pitching that kind of a thing? I've literally gotten like 8 of those in the past month. And, oh, we have this great tool, and you just throw a bunch of data at it, and somebody who doesn't know anything about data science could just like, play with this graphical user interface and like come out with all sorts of awesome stuff. It sounds really good. I honestly have no idea how to tell the difference between any of those, and the amount of like mental work and effort that I need to do to like figure that out. I'm not a thesis-driven investor, so I haven't decided I must do a data startup. If I was that kind of investor, so for example, IA Ventures, Roger Ehrenberg and his team, like they're a data-focused VC. They probably know the difference. They probably know what the right question to ask is. Like, I don't. I'm a generalist. And so I'm like, I don't really know. And you can come in and explain to me why, but I'm pretty sure that that's what the person before said. And so in certain areas, there are higher bars. So if you're doing the same thing that 8 other people are doing, and it seems the same as everybody else, well, now the bar's a little higher. Is there some customer traction? Did somebody, sign up for a contract? Right? Revenues are interesting. If you're the one person who says, yeah, actually, we have a team at PwC that's using accounting data for this, and they just, we just signed up a $100,000 contract. $100,000 contract. That's pretty cool. Like that's not chump change, right? That's not a $10,000 pilot that your cousin works for PwC and $10,000 just disappears from there like no one's even really paying attention, right? $100,000 is a lot. And so what are the meaningful attributes? Sometimes it's people, sometimes it's social proof. Right? Here's the head of the data science department and whatever, who's now using this for whatever interesting. Or show me. Here is some interesting data that we had this much, and here's this really killer analysis. But you also have to explain to me, like, does this really happen at companies? Is this the way things get implemented? And the more that you can tell me, like, I count on you for the science part and for the tech part. I assume you know how to build it. Maybe I'm wrong. Like maybe I bet on the wrong tech team. But like, assume that everything is buildable and that smart people can build cool stuff, and maybe you're that much smarter than the other person. Do you know how to sell this into into a company? Do you know what makes the right customer? The same way I had those 3 questions of like, I know who's going to invest in my fund. Who are the right customers for you? And a lot of these tools and implementations, they feel very custom. I found a retailer that has a unique data set, and we threw it to our tool. It actually feels like a lot of custom work, and I think that's a hurdle in the data business. If you look at Palantir, Palantir's making a lot of money doing one-off custom work. And it's a great business, right? But that is a whole other ballgame. Yes, they have some proprietary tools and all this sort of stuff, but when you're selling into Fortune 50, you're also doing a lot of custom sales. And so it does feel like if you're going to build the next Palantir, you need to have some savvy around sales as much as you have savvy around tech. The other thing related to data businesses is that I find that most people overestimate the clarity and the interestingness of the data at small scale, and whether or not the person can on the other side can actually use that data. So, for example, advertising creative. We're the best at targeting this, finding this individual customer with ads and knowing that somebody is like about to buy a Toyota or whatever the thing is, right? In this very unique, very specific way. And we enable people to provide like some kind of custom messaging, right? That's great, but unfortunately, the advertising department at that agency literally can't produce custom creative at that small scale. Like, it doesn't work to like pay the photographer and the illustrator to create a unique ad. Like, even if I knew your database was so good at predicting a customer, they're probably gonna give them the same ad as everybody else, because they have to scale the human side of creative. This happens all the time I get all these deals that are fashion related. Trend spotting for fashion. I've seen 1 million of these over the last 7 years, and I find it really hard to believe that the Gap or Gucci or whatever, A, they would probably tell you they create the trend. So they're not finding the trend from somebody on the street. And then B, their own data, that they don't have, the data that you can pull off of Instagram is somehow better than the data that Gap already has about its user base. I just really find that hard to believe. And when you say, oh, we can pull data off of Instagram, really? What are you actually going to give me that I would also pay a lot of money for? Because here's the other thing about data businesses. If you enable somebody to increase sales by 30%, unfortunately, they don't give you any part of that 30%. It seems fair, right? If you said, well, give me 10%, and you just grew your sales by 30% with my data tool. That's not the way the revenues work. You get treated like software, right? So they have an IT budget, and sales go up by this much, but the IT budget is that big. And so there's some other tool that they pay $500 a month for, and they use that tool to increase sales by 30%, but you don't get a cut of it. So while it could be extremely useful for their side, if you only have 10 customers, you could increase their sales by $1 billion. That doesn't make you a $1 billion company, because they're comparing you to the Google Analytics they get for free, or some other omniture that they pay $1,000 a month for, whatever. That's how that works. I just thrown a fire hose at you in terms of VC. And I would love to open it up to questions before I go on with other tips. Sure.
Okay, so your blog, this is going to be big.
Yes.
It's pretty interesting. I read a few of the articles, and one that you mentioned is about, you want workers to be likable. My question to you is that even though, and I'm not sure, if it is particularly for you in case, but when you say this is going to be big.com, and I'm sure you must have some kind of insights into which companies might make it big versus which companies might make it bust. What criteria or what kind of insights do you see? Okay, that this company that I'm going to be investing in.
How do I know which one?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, I don't. That's why I'm doing a portfolio.
Okay.
And the way I think about my portfolio is actually more about, can I eliminate the ones that I'm pretty sure won't work? Okay, so I have some criteria that make me say no, and what I'm left with is a portfolio of companies that could work.
Okay.
And most of them won't still, but they're beyond my ability to have that insight. So what are sort of the key criteria that make me say no? Market size, right? That there's not a big enough market even if you do win. Matching the DNA of the team to the challenge of the particular product. So for example, if I backed, when I was at first round, when I backed Single Platform, there's a marketing tool sold to local businesses. If you're doing enterprise sales, the nice thing about enterprise sales is pretty easy to find out who in the organization you sell to. There's usually someone whose job it is to like acquire IT or something, and you go and pitch them, and at least you know the person on the other side of the table, it's their job to buy your software. They might not, but at least you're talking to the right person. If you sell into pizzerias, it is nobody's job at that pizzeria to buy tech. Right? Like Uncle Bob's managing the cash register and all this sort of stuff. That to me is like the hardest sale ever, when they are so busy running their store when they're open and you can't talk to them when they're closed. Wiley, who's the CEO of that company, ran sales at Seamless for 10 years. So the reason why like every restaurant you know is on Seamless is basically because of him and his sales team. So he was the right person to do that particular business. That's very key. So I wouldn't invest in a sales-oriented business without that key salesperson. And some sales people some businesses are more sales-oriented than others. The other thing is, do the resources match the goals? Okay. So you're raising a seed round. Where's this thing getting us? And the answer better not be 12 months. Because I'm 100% convinced you could spend this money in 12 months. That's not an accomplishment, right? Where, as a company, are we getting to in terms of value creation? Is there a really hard thing that we're getting to say, well, this thing really takes off when we launch in 3 cities, and the amount of money we're raising is enough to be in 3 cities for 6 months, whatever the thing is. So you tell me. A lot of times people say, well, what's the magic number for a number of users or whatever? You tell me why it's hard to get 100,000 users for your thing, but anybody can get to 20. Or it's you run into this hard problem at 100,000 users and no one else has been able to respond. That's one of those sort of you tell me things. Okay. And make sure you have enough money to get there. And enough money that, because remember there's only a couple of potential outcomes. At the end of our seed round, we either A, go cash flow positive, we don't need anybody else's money. B, somebody wants to buy this thing because it's awesome, and most times after a seed round is probably not big enough. C, that somebody else wants to fund it. It's pretty easy to predict like what Series A investors want. You can ask them if you write about it, all that sort of stuff, right? Or D, we run out of money, and I don't want D. So you need to be sure that your plan gives you enough time to get to one of those things. And I'd say the last there's one other. No, well that's part of it. And then what I'm left over is workable plan. Sure.
But do you expect the entrepreneur already have prototype ready before you even consider to meet them or talk to them?
That's an interesting question. So do I expect them to have a prototype ready? So I have funded pre-product companies. I won't necessarily do it in every area, so it's frustrating, but the answer is it depends. It depends on a couple of factors. So, and the key part of your question is when you start talking to them, which is a little different than when you actually pitch. There are many instances of companies where the amount of time I've been talking to them is a long time, and the time they're ready for money is actually much later in the process. So I don't think there's harm in having a conversation. So you want to make those conversations useful to you, right? So emailing an investor and saying, what do you think about this? That's probably not going to give you a useful answer, because it's too open-ended. Like, what do you mean what I think? Like, do I think I would fund it? Like, do I think customers would buy it? Half the time I'm not the target customer anyway, so you probably shouldn't be asking me that. But if you ask a more pointed question to say, hey, I noticed you've funded some companies like Social Sign-In that started out selling individual restaurants with their Wi-Fi marketing tool, and now is going to enterprise clients. Like, do you think it's worth starting with the smaller ones or swinging for the fences with the bigger ones or something like that? That is a very pointed question that either I could provide specific insight to, or I know the answer, or I can point you to somebody else who has the answer. Getting those types of conversations started. Hey, I know you had some familiarity with company X, or I think you did, or whatever. I think that the reason why they went out of business is that, but do you think that VCs are sour on that space because they went out of business or something. Those are the types of questions that I uniquely could answer. Sometimes it's just a matter of getting an email answer, maybe not a meeting. I'm very protective of my one-on-one time, so I try to get to all my emails. I do get to all my emails, like, eventually. So you might just ask a question or pitch, and I'd say, hey, actually I have 3 questions about this, but I really want you to answer first. And maybe we'll get the back and forth over a week or so before I decide whether or not I want to take a meeting. So I think there's no harm in starting an early conversation if you think I'm the person who might be a good investor for this or might have some insight. And I'll tell you whether or not I think that thing is easy to build. I actually think that the things that I would be less likely to back pre-product are ones where design is really key. So like, I've used every calendar scheduling thing you could ever imagine, and like the user experience of like, how do you make that convenient but not creepy and not intrusive and all this sort of stuff is a really big user interface challenge. Unless I knew that you had built something really great from a design perspective before, I'm probably not likely to invest in that before I saw something. But if it's, hey, we got this really smart team of data scientists and we have this insight into scaling this tech, like, I'm probably actually much more likely to invest in a team that can build hardcore tech before they've built it based on some very early prototype indications than I am to invest in a technical team that hasn't designed a complex consumer problem before. But never too early to start the conversation. I'm literally about to back a founder that I've known for 11 years. And it's been 11 years of watching him, like, this is the thing he was put on the earth to do. And I just know him that well, and I'm very excited to back that business. That's not going to mean that it's going to take 11 years of pitching me. Like, it'll go up.
One quick question.
Okay.
Say, if like some entrepreneur when they want to talk to you, but however they ask you to sign a non-disclosure.
No, I'm not going to sign a I'm not going to sign it. Because there's too much of a chance that you're working on something interesting and somebody else in this room is working on the very same thing, right? And I just happen to like their thing that much better. And if I signed an NDA, you're going to get pissed because you're going to think that I gave them your idea, but I didn't. And I don't want to have to defend myself or whatever. Chances are somebody's working on your thing all at the same time. I don't want to steal your business. I'm not as good as you at running that particular business. I have a job. So I think you need in the early stages feedback more than you need to like protect the idea, because someone's probably working on it already.
From the standpoint of somebody raising money, are there any tools or social networks like AngelList or anything that you recommend people use, and what's the use case?
So I was on a panel the other day where somebody said that that AngelList is best used if you're sort of like half committed already. I don't think AngelList is necessarily helpful for somebody to be the first person to jump in. I don't think most professional investors watch AngelList. When it first came out, I will admit that, like, we were looking at the deals every day and we realized, wait, these are the same deals that were just emailing us last week, and so they're not necessarily better than any other deals. I think it's helpful to fill out all those profiles. It's very frustrating to me if I hear about a company or find something, but like there's nothing for me to click around, or you've got some written, or I can find you and your team and all that sort of stuff. Fundraising is still sort of a blocking and tackling kind of thing. I don't think any network is easier. Yeah, and I would say that there's sort of 2 ways of going about it. One is getting a lead, right? Finding somebody who's willing to agree with you on terms, cover a nice chunk of it, and help you syndicate. A good lead will say, I'm doing this, I'm excited about this, you should come in with me too. I would be very suspect of any firm that says, I love this is great, we totally want to do this, just go find a lead. they're really saying like, okay, I'm pretty sure there's nothing here. But if somebody really smart comes into this, I'll give it another look because I'm willing to look at anything that they do. But I'm pretty sure I'm not going to convince anybody to do that. Like that is the worst VC pass, right? Because then like you get a lead, and Andreessen Horowitz comes in. It's like, oh wait, yeah, I totally remember. I said that was interesting. Right? Well, that doesn't mean anything. Right? I said it was interesting. So why didn't you come back to me? I can't believe you closed with Andreessen Horowitz and not me. So don't count the money until it's in the bank, until you get a yes. Also, and I hate to say this because I used to be an analyst, if you're not talking to partners, you're not getting traction in that firm. And there are some analysts and some principals or associates or whatever who are actually good at getting the attention of other people in the firm, but be very clear. At a VC firm, partners make decisions. There are some principals who can lead deals. I was one of those principals when I was at first round, but actually it was this quirky setup where like only partners could vote. So I could lead a deal, but I actually couldn't vote on my own deals. So I had to get 3 partners. So if I wasn't introducing you to partners on the team, and be like, oh, Chris really likes it. I'm going to introduce you to Josh now. And then Josh really likes it. No, we want you to come in for a partner meeting. Like, that was real traction. There are too many times where, like, junior people at firms get really psyched about deals, and they're willing to take meetings with you, and they're trying to craft a thing, but you just got to be careful. Like, you may have taken 5 meetings with that associate, but that's not necessarily getting the whole team involved. Because I'll run into that partner, and they're like, oh, I've never heard of that deal. Because the associate hasn't brought it up yet. Sure.
Can you tell us a little bit about the conversations you have with the 17 out of the 30 companies that end up not making you any money? Like, you know, people hear all the time, fail fast. What are the conversations like either in those pivot meetings or once they come back to you and say, you know, this isn't working?
So I get violently angry and turn large and green and just, you know, no, it's fine. And I learned that when I was an entrepreneur, and you know, in terms of doing startups, like I'm 0 for 1. And so if anybody has ever had startup success in this room, like you are better than me at doing what I have funded you to do. And I had to write that email of like, dear investors, we are now a tax write-off. Like, it didn't go, I didn't write it that way, but I literally spent a whole day, like 7 hours crafting this email. And this is on top of like, you have to keep your investors apprised of what's going on, right? Do not ever surprise anybody with like, hey, we kind of ran out of money. Like they should know. They should know how bad things are going. They should know that you're trying. You should ask for their help and support or whatever, but sometimes like they just don't go well. And so we pushed and tried and listened and had meetings and did all that sort of stuff. And at the end, we wrote this email. I said, it's tax write-off now. And within 10 minutes, 2 of my investors wrote back. One of them said, hey, you know, I know you guys worked really hard. You know, let me know the next time you guys do something. What glutton for punishment? Like, why would you ever back us again? Okay. The other investor wrote back and they're like, hey, I just got my distribution check from my investment in this other company that just went public, so I'm 1 for 2 today, and I'm way up. And so they've got other deals. That guy was like just so stupidly happy that it invested in a company 9 years ago that just went public. That like he could care less that he like lost 25 grand on you or whatever, right? So they have other deals, they have enough money where it's fine. And I think if you are honest, upfront, and transparent, and work really hard for these people, and you feel like you are a steward of their capital and you try hard, it's fine. There are conversations where like it's clear that it's not going well, but there's still like a fair amount of money left in the bank. And generally what I'll say is like, all right, like what I don't want you to do is keep pushing the rock up this hill. Because you all agreed like the thing doesn't work. Now different investors have different approaches on this. There was one VC that when, if you've read the Twitter book, like they built Odeo, which was a podcasting tool, and like that didn't work because then iTunes accepted podcasts and then you didn't need Odeo anymore. The investor wanted their money back. And Odeo pivoted into becoming Twitter. And so they basically gave them their money back. I think they gave them like one small, tiny little, like, I think the entrepreneur insisted that like, we don't give you all the money back. Like, just keep this one tiny little like schmuck insurance piece, just in case, you know, we do anything big. But they could have been the largest investor in Twitter, but they took the money back, or they insisted that they get the money back from this pivot. You know, if you had invested in Stuart Butterfield's game that became Slack, like twice Stuart has done this, right? Because it was a thing that became Flickr. They weren't trying to build a photo thing, and then there was something else that they were trying to build when they built Slack. And so he's really good at pivoting. I think I'm willing, and first of all, I'm stuck in the company. I really can't do anything about it, but what I suggest to entrepreneurs is like, let's take some reasonable amount of days. Look, first of all, let's not spend on any money that we don't have to spend right now. So if you have like a marketing person and you're pretty sure that like there's nothing for them to market, we should probably get rid of them and we should probably cut our burn. Let's take 45 days, right? And come up with an idea a week that we can test or something like that in the space that is like with your core knowledge and expertise. Like, don't just start building random shit. Like, what do you actually know about? And let's maybe give it another couple of shots. But after that, I think it's reasonable to say like, hey, we didn't get there. Maybe we should give the money back. And I think that's fine.
On that note,
Sure.
we're out of time, but
Okay.
thank you very much, Charlie O'Donnell. Yeah, Charlie will be here for one-on-one questions, for only a brief moment, because I think he has to go somewhere.
I do need that. You can email me. It's charlie@brooklynbridge.vc. If I don't respond back in a week, just politely forward it back to me.
Thank you all for coming.
Cool.